of Google.
So I've got to make this radio documentary about the power of Google, or more precisely, the Google search algorithm. That's the computer recipe, I suppose, which delivers the results on your screen when you search for something with Google. It's really complex and most of it's secret, but does it have too much influence over our lives? Well, I better start by doing what I usually do when I have to find stuff out. In fact, it's what a lot of people do first: ask Google. So what are the top 3 results I get if I do this search? How powerful is Google?
Quora. Is Google the most powerful company in the world? Bloomberg. Is Google the world's most powerful company? YouTube. How powerful is Google?
So that's what we get from Google. Let's find out what some humans think about that question.
The Google algorithm is one of the most important things that's ever happened in human history.
As a source of influence over people, I can tell you without doubt there has never been anything like this in the history of humankind. Nothing.
Could the Google algorithm be described as the most powerful force in the world?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair way to describe it. It certainly would be among the contenders because so many people depend on Google to get their knowledge.
Power over information is the greatest power that we have. And a non-transparent tool used by the majority of internet users to retrieve information is an incredibly powerful tool. It's one that we should have real debate about, really trying to see what effects it has societally is really important.
In this programme, I'm going to be exploring that debate. I'll be asking whether the mysterious and ever-changing Google algorithm has too much power. Does this one force exert excessive influence over the information we all access, the success or failure of businesses, the reputation of individuals, and even which political ideas triumph? But first, how far does it reach into our daily lives across the globe? Danny Sullivan, editor of the website Search Engine Land, is a close observer of the world of search.
Google's this incredibly dominant search engine throughout the world. When you look at European countries, it tends to have 90% or more of the share of searches that are happening. In the United States, it has like a 65% share based on some metrics, but it's probably closer to 80% when you look at what website owners and publishers report in terms of the traffic that they receive from search. It's easier to list the countries where it is not the most popular search engine. China, of course, Russia, and I think Japan is still, and I believe it's still that case in South Korea as well. And possibly the Czech Republic might be the 5th one. People always say there's 5 places.
In any other industry, that would be considered a monopoly, wouldn't it? And there would be a lot of anxiety about that.
Well, I mean, there has been anxiety about it, and Google themselves certainly admitted to having a monopoly in search. So the question remains, do you need to curb that in some way?
And the search engine we all use is so pervasive, it's entered the language.
Google is considered to be a synonym for search. People will talk about Googling things. It's become that dominant both in usage and in the mind share.
And for evidence of how deeply Google is embedded in our mindshare, as he puts it, let's turn to someone who studies the use of language.
I'm Tony McHenry. I'm Professor of English Language and Linguistics at Lancaster University. It's very, very interesting. If we go back, of course, about 20 years and look at our data from the early 90s, the word doesn't exist. Whereas now, actually, the word Google is quite frequent in both speech and writing. So if you look in speech, something like 52 times per million words, we will use the word Google. Now, that is really very frequent. But it's also very frequent in writing.
Put that in context.
That makes it more frequent, say, in casual everyday conversation than words like cross or clever or fridge, death, or even eggs.
How does that compare to people talking about searching the internet?
Well, searching the internet is actually quite a rare phrase. So when I looked in 5 million words of casual conversation for this phrase, I didn't find it at all. And when I looked in 1 billion words of writing, it occurs less than once per million words. So actually people are talking about Googling as a sort of way of talking about searching on the internet rather than using the phrase searching the internet.
So, for many people, internet search is Google. For some, Google is more or less the internet. But there's a reason why it is so far-reaching and dominant.
Well, Google is the best. So you have to use Google. You'd be foolish not to.
This is a research psychologist named Robert Epstein. He's actually a big critic of Google, and we'll hear more from him later. But meanwhile, he's explaining why he still relies on it.
Google currently indexes about 45 billion web pages. The next closest competitor in the US is Bing, and they index about 14 billion web pages. What's happening is it's becoming more and more expensive to go ahead and do this kind of crawling or indexing of the entire internet. Google search results are by far the best. I mean, that's the problem.
I'm in a modern kind of square, I suppose, just off a busy intersection in the West End of London, and I'm standing in front of the UK head office of Google. Searching the internet for information is all very well. Sometimes, though, you do want to talk to people, and I'm here to speak to Ben Gomes. When I Googled him, it told me he's described as one of the 2 or 3 key brains behind the search algorithm. But he's not here. He's in Google's HQ in Mountain View, California. And I'm going to be talking to him via a Google Hangout.
So I'm just feeling to the call now. So he should be on the other side in about 2 seconds.
Hey. Now you see me.
Brilliant. Success.
All right.
Oh, what's happened there? Hello, oh, you're back. You're back. Yeah, sorry, you momentarily froze. Okay.
Excellent.
First of all, give us your name and what you do.
My name is Ben Gomes, and I run the core search group at Google.
How does the Google search algorithm work?
So the goal of the Google search algorithm is to not just give you pages with the words you're looking for, but to actually give you the thing that you actually meant. The perfect search is giving you not just the words you typed, but what you were actually looking for. So the Google search algorithm developed a whole bunch of signals, starting with PageRank, which told you which were the most important pages in the web. And we've added hundreds of signals since then. We make something like 1,000 changes a year to the algorithm. We test out 10,000 changes, in part because there are people who are trying to deceive the algorithm in various ways, but mostly because we're trying to improve the algorithm. And those changes could be subtle changes or larger changes. They could involve things like spelling correction, or they could be things like improving synonyms, not just for English, but for languages around the world.
It's supposed to be really secret, a lot of it, isn't it? Can you tell me any of the secrets?
People are constantly trying to guess what the algorithm does so that they can game it, because there's clearly a lot to be gained by coming to the top of the Google search results. So for that reason, we have to keep a lot of it internal.
You said it changes often. Is it changing more often as the years go by?
Absolutely. When Google first started, there were only a handful of signals that we were looking at. And today there are hundreds of signals and many more people obviously working on the problem. So it's changing much faster and in many more different ways.
But could it get to the stage where, frankly, no one person could quite understand what the algorithm was doing?
The complexity of the algorithm does grow over time, and it takes more and more sophistication to understand what the algorithm does. And there are some parts of it that are machine learned where you may not be able to exactly tease out exactly what is going on. But in broad strokes, yes, we do understand what the algorithm is doing.
Well, if anyone understands it, he should. But it's not easy to stay on top of it. David Auerbach, now a technology columnist for Slate magazine, spent 5 years at Google as a software engineer working on the search engine.
There were people who specialized specifically on ranking and results, and even they would specialize in one aspect because it is such an immense thing. I don't think there's anyone who could say, oh, why is this result higher than that result? There's no answer to that question. You can make guesses, and if you actually cared about one particular case, you could look into it. But people who aren't engineers don't realize what a black box such an algorithm can be, even to the people who work on it. You know, we're talking hundreds of millions of lines of code here.
The complexity of the algorithm has encouraged a whole trade, search engine optimization or SEO. built on trying to understand Google's workings and selling that expertise. Dawn Anderson, an SEO consultant for companies in highly competitive search markets such as insurance and travel, monitors new patents that Google submits.
What they're starting to do is artificial intelligence that has been built in as a layer to help them to rank pages. Google are constantly releasing patents, a lot of them now around machine learning, actually teaching the algorithm via what they call rank brain to actually learn what is the best set of results to return for a query. So it's learning itself.
This automated machine learning is bound to make the algorithm even murkier. And in any case, assessing just what is the ideal set of results for any search is not a simple objective matter. David Auerbach again.
What the most relevant search results are for a given query is not necessarily obvious or necessarily something everyone would agree on. And as a consequence of that, even within Google, there's can be disputes about what the most relevant results are. So what you have in terms of constructing this algorithm is a debate about what the most relevant results are and how to create an algorithm that produces those in the maximum number of cases. Changing the algorithm in one way will make some results better and other results worse.
And this is not some ivory tower debate. Just ask Dawn Anderson what difference their search ranking can make for businesses.
Massive difference. Very few people look beyond the first page. It's very important to be up there or thereabouts. It's the difference between a company having a presence commercially and not doing. You know, if you sit back and expect that Google's just going to keep ranking your website because you did something positive 2 years ago, that's not going to happen. You have to be continually trying to provide a great service. And if you do something negative, you know, eventually you're going to fall away. You're not going to rank. You're just going to lose all your ranking. You'll lose traffic. You'll lose sales.
At The Essential Fly, we regularly get asked what flies we would recommend by new fly fishermen. Once we establish the fishermen...
I'm Andy Kitchener, Managing Director of The Essential Fly. We started in 2006 making and designing our own fly fishing flies and fly tying materials, which we sell worldwide. We now have a physical shop, but we actually started purely mail order via the internet. The internet is our bread and butter.
For small businesses like his, changes in the Google algorithm can have a very big impact.
Google is crucial for new business. 80% of the traffic for new users comes from Google. In May 2013, we were really impacted. New users reduced from 30,000 new users per month down to 18,000, which came as, shall we say, a shock. Revenues were down about 10%. It really stunted our growth.
How could you tell that that was due to changes in the algorithm? Were you not appearing on the front page of certain searches?
What we saw was certain words that were on the first page dropped. For example, the word salmon flies dropped from page 1 to beyond page 7. We ascertained that Google had released a new version of their algorithm, and it gone deep into sites looking for links that it didn't like. The rules were changed. No one told you what those changes in rules were or gave you any kind of assistance.
And were you able to get in touch with Google and say, listen, what's going on? What can we do about this?
You are joking. Google will talk to you in 2 circumstances. 1, if you pay them money. 2, if you've stopped paying them money. And that's the only way that you can actually get through to anyone in Google.
But sometimes there's good news.
Literally, one day, December 2014, I suddenly saw our position for one of the words I was monitoring rise 50 places on Google from page 7 to page 2. And it was such a shock. We decided to really look at all the keywords, and we saw our position changing with an average leap of 50 positions on Google. It was an incredible thing to see. Traffic increased 75% overnight.
So give us a feeling of what it's like over the years being on the receiving end of the power of Google.
It's horrifying. It's like having someone in your business that will make their own demands and change the rules in an instant. 1 minute you will be laughing and smiling as business increases. Next minute you'll see your traffic plummet and you will be close to tears. It's just a roller coaster.
Do you think Google's too powerful?
Google's far too powerful. No one has any control over them. They are a complete law unto themselves.
Around the world, companies big and small are trying to ride this roller coaster, desperate for the thrill of a high ranking and the surge of business it brings, but fearful of falling off. But Ben Gomes wants them to see Google as a friend.
We do give advice to webmasters in terms of what they should do for their website in order for it to be ranked well for their own business. One of the things that makes this more complex is that there are a lot of people trying to game the system, and a lot of people who prey on the fears of people in these businesses as well. And so there is a constant battle, but we always take a great deal of care about the signals we use to make sure that we are returning what's most relevant. We always hold ourselves to that yardstick. Is this relevant to what the user typed in? We are trying to give the user what they wanted.
Yet Google stands accused of having another agenda in its search results, of using its dominance to direct searchers to products of its own, products which are allegedly inferior. Critics claim that it's biased. Let's try a search. Let's try, is Google biased? Up it comes. Oh, to be fair, the first result, evidence that Google's search results are biased. Business Insider. Well, it's not biased because it's telling us that it's biased. Oh, second one, 5 reasons the Google search bias study is biased. Well, let's get another view. Luther Lowe is Vice President of Public Policy at Yelp, an American firm supplying online local information on businesses. He isn't happy about how Google search has been developing.
What's happened over the years is that as the search page has evolved, Google has attempted to put answers, and I'm to myself putting the word answers in air quotes over here. They put answers on the page. Now, in some instances, that makes sense for fact-based information, sports scores, weather forecasts, stock quotes. But when it comes to non-fact-based queries, and the user sees Google Plus inside this answer box at the top of the page, that's where it becomes problematic for consumers. Google is capable of providing the best, but instead they just choose to promote Google Plus over great organic content around the web.
Now, I'm going to do a search right now. I've done a search for restaurants, Bury. Bury is a town in northern England. So just to describe what I'm seeing a map. Then I'm seeing a box with 3 restaurants. The top one has got no reviews, then one with 4 reviews. And then under that, I have to scroll a bit. I get the 10 best Bury restaurants from TripAdvisor. So what's wrong with that?
So what you're describing, Rory, is part of an evolution of the Google search page. Now, a map is helpful, but it's tethered to information which Google is actually benefiting from. What is going on here is Google could very easily power the box you're describing, the one where there's one that doesn't have any reviews, one with a handful of reviews. They could power that with TripAdvisor, which actually has hundreds and hundreds of reviews by fellow consumers. They just choose not to because they want to siphon that traffic into their own TripAdvisor Yelp clone and build up their own content. And we're alleging that that is basically an unfair and anti-competitive practice.
And that's not the only area where Google has been accused of promoting its own products.
Later this month. Google has denied any wrongdoing after it was formally accused by the European Union of unfairly favouring its own shopping services in search results. The EU Competition Commissioner, Margrethe Vestager, said she believes Google is exploiting its market dominance.
I'm concerned that Google has artificially boosted its presence in the comparison shopping market, with the result that consumers may not necessarily see what's most relevant for them.
This is one of a number of disputes between the European Commission and Google over competition issues, which have yet to be resolved. It all stems from Google's dominance in search, at least according to Yelp's Luther Lowe.
Google has reached a point where it knows that there is no way another search engine is going to displace it. It has a monopoly in general search. The problem arises when you leverage your dominance in one business area and begin using that dominance unfairly to go into adjacent business areas.
I asked Ben Gomes for Google's response.
What we're trying to do is always return to you the answer to the question that you're looking for. If you're looking for why is the sky blue, we will give you an answer to that. And if you're looking to buy things, we will give you results for that. The results that you're seeing for businesses are from that business. You're looking for the businesses on the web, and we will be giving you pointers to the websites of those businesses.
So you'd say it's completely neutral. It's nothing to do with the fact that this might benefit other parts of Google's business if the results are framed in a certain way.
Going again back to it, right? You were looking for restaurants. We're trying to give you restaurants.
Another controversial area in which the search giant's activities have led to conflict with the EU surrounds its impact on individuals. I'm sitting in a cafe and I'm Googling someone. She's called Julia Powles, Powles. What have we got? Top link is Dr. Julia Powles, Faculty of Law. That's from Cambridge University. Then Julia Powles in the Guardian newspaper, Julia Powles Twitter. And then there's a whole row of pictures of this Julia Powles. And then there's LinkedIn. But luckily, I don't really need that because Julia Powles is sitting with me. Julia, does this give a fair picture of who you are and what you do?
Well, I think personally I find it quite an accurate representation, but as somebody who participates in public debate, I have a relatively curated profile. For many people who don't have a large public profile, the information about them is a very incomplete, shadowy sort of version of themselves. It's the derivative information that may be picked up through their accidental activities. They participated in a 5K fun run 2 years ago and they got this personal best. It may be that they were a member of a particular political movement 6 years ago. It may be that they were an incidental witness to a crime 10 years ago.
So what has been your overall concern about how Google frames the identity of somebody?
The delusion of Google is that we're getting some version of the truth, but it's whatever information is available on a sort of rough scraping of the public web, and the information that's on there can define you. The impression that we gain from searching someone's name is actually, it's a very real thing.
And yes, from sizing up someone before a first date to assessing a job candidate, Google has become the place we go to know more about people. If you're not famous and don't have much of a web presence, then the search results for your name can, paradoxically, have an even greater significance. That's what led to a European court case brought by an obscure Spaniard upset that he was defined by Google as that guy who had to auction a house in the 1990s because he had some financial problems. And that led to the so-called right to be forgotten, which means that aggrieved individuals can ask Google to remove certain search results.
Certainly, I have sympathy for people who feel that the search results don't capture how they would like to be presented.
Ben Gomes again.
But realize we're not trying to frame a person. We are just providing you with a set of results about what has been said about that person on the web, right? So we are merely a conduit to the information about that person that is already out there.
But you are by far the most powerful way that people's identity online is framed. If I'm, a reasonably obscure person, then the results that come to my name in Google will be how the world sees me.
But don't you think that the actual information you're getting about the person is on the page that they go to, rather than in the ordering of the pages? I mean, the actual page is the actual information, right? So we are reflecting the world as it exists.
So when we Googled you, the results said you're an argumentative Indian or a diplomat for search. Has Google got you right?
So in my personal life, I am very argumentative, but I think part of arguing is actually understanding other points of view, perhaps helps you be a better diplomat.
So Google is right, is it? We've got you right.
I hope so.
This is an area where the search engine expert Danny Sullivan thinks Google could be less argumentative, more diplomatic, or perhaps less geeky, more human.
they can get so stuck in figuring out engineering solutions that sometimes you feel like maybe they forget the humanity. You have a right to be forgotten in Europe because people in Google were so unwilling to change the search results because that just, I guess, feels wrong to them. They should just leave it all to the algorithm, and they don't perhaps understand that actually there may be times where it really doesn't make sense to be showing something for somebody's name. Or maybe you need to think more about the societal impacts that you have of search engines, and no one really seems to do that. They still don't have a sort of designated ombuds or somebody who feels like is out there thinking, is this the right thing for us to be doing with search? And that's probably the thing that concerns me most, because, you know, search has such a big impact on our society, and you kind of wish that they were thinking about that more than they seem to.
Let's try another one. What about politics? Can Google affect the result of an election? And top of the list, an article in Politico magazine called How Google Could Rig the 2016 Election, and it's by a man called Robert Epstein.
I'm Dr. Robert Epstein. I'm a research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology, which is in Vista, California. The main thing that we've found is that when something is higher in search rankings, people take it more seriously than if it's lower. They take it so seriously that, in fact, it will shift the opinions of undecided people, and it'll shift opinions so dramatically that just being higher in search rankings can win you an election. And, of course, no one has control over how Google puts things into order on their search rankings. That's the problem. And because search rankings are ephemeral, there is also no paper trail.
But are you actually saying that Google engineers are going into the algorithm and tweaking it and saying, make it come out so that candidate A is favored over candidate B?
Well, first of all, that's perfectly legal for them to do, so it wouldn't surprise me. But there are three ways in which this could be occurring. Either, a top Google executive could literally change a couple of parameters, and that would do it. Or an employee lower down, in the pecking order could do it. A rogue employee could do it. There's a history at Google of rogue employees having done extraordinary things. But the worst possibility is that this is happening because of what they call organic search processes, meaning their algorithm, their computer program is doing this. In other words, the computer program is always going to put things into an order. And in every election, it almost certainly is going to put one candidate ahead of another. And when it does that, it can drive votes to that candidate. In other words, a lot of elections now are being decided by a computer program.
Let's assume that there is no human intervention and that the algorithm is naturally favoring one candidate over another. Is there anything to be done about it?
The only way to suppress this effect completely, which we call SEAM, the search engine manipulation effect, is to kind of mix up the results. So we can protect people from manipulation if, at least on the first page, we just alternate the results. Think of it as an equal time rule. We have an equal time rule in the U.S. Regarding radio and television, and maybe there needs to be an equal time rule. A little bit of alternating here and there.
Of course, politics isn't just about election results, it's about issues. Let's do another search. Fracking.
According to BBC, fracking is the process of drilling down into the earth before a high-pressure water mixture is directed at the rock to release the gas inside.
So a BBC result top, but the second result is the dangers of fracking, and that is a site, www.dangersoffracking.com. I think it's clear where they stand. So that's the result with Google. Let's try another search engine, Bing, fracking. And pretty soon, up at the top, comes what is fracking? This appears to be an industry-funded website. Why fracking is an economic and energy security solution. A rather more positive view of fracking then. So at first sight, Google seems to give more prominence to the dangers of fracking, while Bing gives the benefits top billing.
When we get back our search results, we tend to click only on the answers we get near the very top. And if those answers favor one perspective, that shifts our opinion. We completed an experiment just recently about fracking, and we were able to shift people's opinions about fracking after just one search. So imagine search after search after search, day after day, people seeing rankings that favor one perspective over another. That shifts people's thinking, attitudes, behavior. That can have an enormous impact.
Dr. Epstein says there's an underlying reason for all of this.
The problem with Google is that there's really only one for all intents and purposes, and people trust it. We have the impression, because of that computer algorithm, that when Google shows us search results, that those results are completely impartial, completely objective. There's no competitor to correct that perspective that we have. And that's why the search rankings are so very powerful.
Robert Epstein has been talking about Google's power to swing elections for more than 2 years. The company's response has been to dismiss his research as a flawed conspiracy theory. It proclaims Google has never, ever re-ranked search results on any topic, including elections, to manipulate user sentiment. That argument is supported by David Auerbach, the former Google engineer who now writes for Slate.
I've looked at Professor Epstein's work, and I haven't seen anything that would convince me that there is any intended bias there.
But while he dismisses the suggestion that there's been any conscious distortion of search results, he wonders whether another form of bias might be at work.
Emergent bias is a case in which the algorithm reflects approximately what Google thinks of as the most relevant results, and yet relevancy as judged by the community of humanity is biased. Because when we think of relevant results, that doesn't mean objective, because people don't necessarily think the most objective sources are the most relevant sources. And that is something that I think is a much greater concern, and yet dealing with it is a paradox, because if you're saying, oh, Google, don't return these emergent bias results, what you're effectively asking them to do is to explicitly manipulate their results.
Here's the difficulty then. Do we want Google's searches to be relevant or objective? Mind you, there are some queries where Google does explicitly interfere to prevent what might be thought of as antisocial results, from child abuse images to music copyright violations. But how uncomfortable does something have to be for Google to intervene? One recently publicised example was the search term unprofessional hair, which for images mostly threw up pictures of black women. Does that mean the algorithm is racist?
If you look at the actual results for that query, it brings up something that's quite a tricky and interesting challenge for us. I have a lot of empathy for the people who see that set of results. But if you look at the actual pages, and I looked at several of them, they're actually talking about what is professional and unprofessional hair. The pages talk about something very subtle about why this hairstyle is not unprofessional. And our algorithms today, unfortunately, are still not able to pick up on that very complex nuance of the double negative in it. So we're still working on it, but it's still a big challenge for computers.
So there are difficult sort of moral and philosophical questions for you to confront as you tinker with the search algorithm. It may turn up results that you, as a company, don't like morally.
We've always taken the view that this is an algorithmic process, and we've done that from the very early days of Google, that we do not interfere with that algorithmic process. There are things that we may disagree with, that's true. Some of them reflect societal biases. Some of them do reflect subtleties of language that we don't yet understand.
A search engine, it's become clear, is both a hugely powerful and a deeply complex piece of kit. And even those driving it seem unclear about where it's heading. How then should we see the force of Google?
The argument with tech is always that these monopolies are transient and that the market will self-correct. I think the thing about Google having the sort of power it does is that it embeds itself, and I think in increasingly intrusive ways.
The technology law expert Julia Powles is among those who are deeply worried about where Google is taking us.
So at the moment we have this perception, you can look at Google or you can not look at Google, and you still can roam the world make choices, feel that you have a degree of autonomy. All of Google's future ambitions are to move it right into, as Google has expressed its ambition, to give us the answers before we know the questions. And I think that's the thing that's very worrying about what we can see now is incomplete, is derivative, becoming actually something that limits in a way that we can't quite perceive our discovery of the world and each other. And I think that we all hold some anxiety about the extent of that power, but we don't really have solutions.
You're saying we trust Google too much.
We do indeed.
But Ben Gomes, one of the big brains who has spent years developing the mysterious power of the algorithm, looks back to his childhood in India for his vision of what the search engine can deliver for society.
See, I come from a third world country. I grew up in a place where the British Council is the only source books. Today, I think what we hope to do is bring the power of that information to everybody. I think our goal is to empower people, because people who have better information, I think, are able to make better decisions, they're able to educate themselves better, they're able to act better in their lives, and that is really fundamentally our goal. That is what the search algorithm is trying to do. To the extent it's more effective, it does empower people more.
But it can change the way people are seen. It can make a business fail or thrive. People allege, I know you don't think this is true, that it could even swing elections.
People are imputing a lot of things to the algorithm, but really what it is we're here to answer questions, if you will, to answer the questions that you have.
Let's have just one last search. What is the mission of Google?
According to Google, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful.
Well, in the course of making this programme, I've made dozens of searches. The results have arrived in under a second. The information delivered to me has been mostly just what I was seeking. But what strikes me is that all around the world, people are doing similar searches, using the same search engine and seeing roughly the same information. Our understanding of the world is being shaped, for good or ill, by just one Californian company. And that is just a little bit worrying.
I'm searching for the truth. I'm searching for the truth. Some sweet day we'll get there in the end.
Other search engines are available.
Some sweet day we'll get there in the end.
The Force of Google was presented by Rory Kethlin-Jones and produced by Martin Rosenbaum. This programme will be a Radio 4 Seriously podcast.